Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for July 31st through August 6th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 7 shows, I watched 1 movie, and I listened to 1 book. As just kind of an aside, if I make any pained expressions while filming this and they don't seem to fit what I'm talking about, that's just because I mildly sprained my ankle the other day. I was walking down a flight of stairs, went to go to the very bottom of the step, like the landing off the stairs, and all of a sudden I was on the ground, and it's because my ankle made a weird noise and then just gave out on me. And then yesterday I ended up doing a lot more walking than I anticipated, so my ankle is angry. It's okay right now, like I can stand on it, it's not like it's broken or anything, but it's definitely bruised, and who knows when it'll decide that it doesn't like this exact position I'm standing in. Just wanted to point that out ahead of time in case something weird happens and then people are wondering what the heck is wrong with me. That's what's wrong with me. I hurt my ankle. First this week I read Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. I believe the subtitle of this one is The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. This is a book that's been on my list for ages and a few different people have recommended it. One of it is my friend Sarah from the Costume Codex, and she just recently announced a new podcast called Real Fat People that will be coming out very soon. So if you're interested in fat phobia in media, please go follow her channel and then also follow the podcast. Fearing the Black Body is a very academic book about the origins of fat phobia throughout the times. This goes back to, I think, the Renaissance is when we started talking about it, mainly because that's about when we started seeing black people in European art. In fact, a lot more of this book is based on art history than I previously thought, but going into this book I didn't really have any preconceived notions of when in history we were starting. So since art and portraiture is a medium that still exists from these times, it makes sense to go back and think about the lives of these artists and the paintings themselves and what they tell us about the subject. Like I mentioned, this is a very academic text, so it might be difficult for some to get through it. I definitely struggled a few times because it's been a very long time since I've had to read something academic. However, it's definitely worth reading because the subject is very interesting. There are many points about this that I found very fascinating, but one of them is how fat bodies on women and men were treated differently and how that changed throughout different times. Different body types were also given different attributes, whether or not they were true about individual people, and those just stuck. And then eventually medicine came in and decided to reflect in its findings what people already thought about these bodies, which is bonkers to me. You would think this is scientific, and in many cases it's just not. The other physical book I read this week was a graphic novel called Flung Out of Space. This is about the misadventures of Patricia Highsmith, who's an author I don't really know anything about. I haven't read any of her works, although they are on my list. I was pretty sure I knew that she was a lesbian, and that was confirmed in this graphic novel. This graphic novel is based around true events, but because there's nobody to really tell you how conversations went and that type of thing, there is an author's note at the front that does tell you that a lot of this is sort of made up, but they wanted to stress very clearly that Patricia Highsmith wasn't exactly a good person, and if you come out of this graphic novel having conflicted feelings about her, good. For a lot of her career, before she sold some proper novels, she was actually working as a comic book writer, and she absolutely hated it. She thought that that medium was just garbage and for garbage people, which makes it very happy that this life story of hers is in graphic novel format. This definitely has a lot of internalized homophobia, and they didn't shy away from also portraying some of her other not so great traits. Also, I think my roommate is showering right now, so if you can hear that, I'm sorry. Her novels are still on my eventual TBR, but it's really nice to have this context of her life. On to the shows we watched. We finished the first season of Westworld and watched the first episode of the second season, and I have to tell you, there were several people throughout this cast where I really wanted to look them up and be like, what do I know you from? And I'm very glad that I didn't do that before getting to the end of the first season, because I would have majorly spoiled myself for some reveals, because a lot of things go on and a lot of twists are turned. However, some of the biggest reveals of my time on IMDb after that include the fact that one of the guys played Carl in Love Actually, and another one is Trevor from the Grand Theft Auto franchise. I've never even played the game, and I know who Trevor is. I don't know how. I've probably watched other people play the game, honestly. And then there's various other people that I knew from various other things. I also went down kind of a rabbit hole and realized that one of them was in a lot of episodes of Psych, which I definitely watched all of, and then I found out that there's not 1, not 2, but 3 movies in that franchise that I did not know about. So if I ever do a Psych rewatch, I will also then watch the movies. I don't think I'd remember enough about Dule Hill and the other guy's relationship to really enjoy the movies without going back and enjoying the shenanigans of the show. As you might know, last week RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars finished, and this week RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under started. It seems this year that we're going to have at least 2 English-speaking seasons on at all times. I don't hate it, but it's a lot to keep up with. This is just the 2nd season of Down Under, and this was a good introduction. What I really liked about this introduction is there were a few queens that really stuck together because the other queens are kind of, you know, catty about the fact that they're older, and that's just ageism, and I don't like it, especially when there's somebody who has blazed the trails for you to be doing what you're doing, and then you're just like, ah, you're old, huh, that's the joke? Like, what is that? I was also perfectly okay with who went home this week because I found that person really annoying. There was a lot of screaming that didn't need to be there, and you know what? It was probably down to nerves. This person is probably a lovely human being, but I just couldn't handle some of their quirks, and so out of the 2 that could have gone home, I was glad it was that one. I also watched this week's episode of Canada's Drag Race, and this week was interesting because everybody was given a box with a different label. However, every single box had the exact same materials in it, and everybody had to make something of their own choosing for the main stage. And I thought that was a really cool twist. Not only did they get to cause some of the drama by one of them having to label everybody else, but then you're literally given all the same things, make something new. And as always on shows like this, it's broken down between the people that can sew and the people that can't. I was pretty sad to see this contestant go home, but it was pretty nice to see my hometown hero, Jimbo, on the judging panel. That must be lovely for her. We also finished the 3rd season of Umbrella Academy, and oh my goodness, this show, every time it ends, you're like, okay, well, this is a new big twist that everybody's going to have to adjust to, and then it seems like every season, at least this last season, probably took place over about a week. So yeah, let's see how long the next season is, and how these characters adjust to this new situation. Because it's not exactly like they can just do a do-over. However, this ending does make me feel like maybe there won't be an apocalypse in the next season, but that would be out of character for the show, so I have no idea. I was visiting my best friend this week, so we also finished the 4th season of The Masked Singer, which is always just such a delight. This season in particular, I think there were only maybe 2 or 3 celebrities that I actually knew who they were, as opposed to like, I know that name and I know that that person is an actor, or I'm pretty sure that that person is a talk show host, but I haven't seen any of their shows. There were probably only 2, maybe 3 people that I was like, ah yes, I know exactly who that celebrity is. But that's fine. There was some phenomenal talent, and that is always a good time. We also had some time left over, so we started our official rewatch of Supernatural. This is a show that I've probably only seen the first 2 or 3 seasons of, and I would have watched it back when it was just on television and you would just catch random episodes. And at that point in my life, I never sat down at such and such a clock on such and such a day to watch a show, which is a long-winded way of saying I definitely haven't seen all of this show because I just watched it before I moved to Europe, and then when I came back it was so advanced in the plot that I was like, I don't know who any of these characters are, it's fine. But now the plan is to start from the beginning and go all the way through. I also remember that at one point way in the past, probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I actually tried to do a rewatch and keep track of how many people died in the show, and I gave up pretty quickly. I'm pretty sure in these first 3 episodes, 10 people die. And one of the many people in the 2nd episode is played by Cory Monteith, which it was nice to see him again. It was the pre-Glee days. He is from Vancouver Island, I'm pretty sure, or at least he has lived on Vancouver Island before, which is where I live. So it was bittersweet to see him again, because it was nice to see him again, but sad because he is no longer with us. I look forward to continuing to watch this show to get to some characters that I know are there, such as the one played by Felicia Day, because I like her a lot. And then the one that's played by Misha Collins that everybody loves, and all of that. Like, I know very little about the show, besides there are characters that people absolutely love, and there are characters that people ship, and there's maybe some queer baiting down the line many times. I look forward to discovering all of that. The last show that I watched this week is a Netflix series that only has 4 episodes. It's called Exhibit A, and it goes into different forensic techniques that people have used in different cases and how they can be very flawed. The 4 different episodes covered 4 different topics, and let's see if I can remember what they were. There was one on blood analysis, there was one on cadaver dogs, there was one on video evidence, and there was a fourth one that's going to elude me. The other one was DNA touch evidence. The most bonker things about this type of evidence is people will tell you that this evidence exists when they've really manipulated the data to let you know that it exists. And this series did a really good job of showing you both sides, because for example, in the blood analysis, when we start out and there's this guy that's like, well, there was this murder, it's been unsolved, and then, you know, technology's gotten better, so I was told to go over this nightgown worn by the victim's wife from the night of his death, and I took, you know, 3 months and I went over it and I found 50 different microscopic points of blood all over it, which means she must have been within a 3-foot radius of when he was shot. So this woman was tried with this evidence and convicted and is in prison. However, if you look at that evidence in a different way, they didn't actually prove that these different dots that look like blood are in fact blood. Just this guy said, this is blood. They didn't test it to be like, yes, this is definitely blood, and they definitely didn't test it to be like, yes, this is blood and it's definitely the victim's blood. There was also another case where the cops just kind of decided that this man had killed and disposed of his child and pretended there was a carjacking, and they flew in these cadaver dogs from the UK, and the cadaver dog indicated on the car seat. Even if a cadaver dog indicates on something, it doesn't mean you can just say, this person did it. That's really not how it works. And I especially know this is a case because they convicted this man, who happens to be black, of basically like multiple life sentence type things to do with this case based on just this evidence. They have no evidence this child is actually dead besides a cadaver dog indicated on this car seat. Also, without investigating, they just throw out the idea that there was a carjacking. They didn't follow that lead whatsoever. However, there is a very different case. I believe it's the Madeleine McCann case. I might be getting my true crime cases mixed up. But she and her family were on vacation with a bunch of other families, and then she went missing, and cadaver dogs indicated on things that her parents had, but those parents are wealthy and white, so are they in jail? No, they're not. I'm sure this is absolutely no surprise to you, but the justice systems are super broken, super flawed, and this just helps point out how flawed evidence can be. On to the movie I watched this week. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because I really don't know if I could actually explain it all that well. This movie is called Tenet. It is a sci-fi movie, and the basic premise of this is there is a protagonist. I don't even know if we actually get his name. They just call him the protagonist a bunch of times in the film, which is kind of interesting. But he passes a weird test of sorts and is basically in a very secretive spy organization trying to make sure that a world-ending event doesn't happen. What he finds out is there is tech that has come to our time from future times where it's been invented, where things can go in reverse. So, for example, if you hover your hand over a bullet as though you've just dropped it, you can actually just pick it up because whatever the tech is to make it in reverse has happened to that bullet already, so it just sucks itself back up into your hand. This goes for many other objects, and it's kind of revealed sort of how some of this backwards tech works throughout the movie, but it's a lot, and I didn't particularly like sitting through it. And then after the movie finished, as I was walking around just like getting ready to go to bed at night, my brain kept going, am I going forward? Am I going backward? What's happening? So it really messed with my brain, and the best things I can say, like for example, the action sequences were very interesting because of this feature. One of the annoying things is the first person that's telling him about this tech is like, don't think about it too hard. And I'm like, how could you not think about it too hard? Because you're going to throw in all these different things where the audience is kind of going to know things ahead of time, but the audience also doesn't exactly understand how all of the tech works at certain times, and then it's just confusing as all hell. And how can you tell your audience not to think about it too hard? Like, the audience is going to try to figure it out. I spent a lot of time just yelling at it that I don't like it, so that was my experience. The book I listened to this week was The Fae Keeper, which is the follow-up and the end of the duology of The Witch King. I very much enjoyed this. I very much enjoyed the first book, so it was great to get this second book. I, however, would have liked to have read a full synopsis of the first book just to really get my head around what had really happened in the first book before going into the second book, because obviously I'd forgotten some things. I've read probably at least 100 books in between, so I had forgotten some details, but I did pick them back up on the way through, which is good. Especially because I couldn't find a synopsis anywhere on the internet, which is obviously not the fault of this book or this author whatsoever, it's just my experience. What I like about this duology is not only do we get interesting magic and political systems, but we also get this added activism that is very applicable to our real world. We have queer and trans characters, we have talk of climate change, we have talk of politics and how things should be ruled and trying to figure out what's the best, especially under an already broken system, and how to fix it. I also really enjoyed that we got character growth in this, and I also really enjoyed that Wyatt continued to be himself and very snarky, and a protagonist that many people will profess that they don't like because he's an unlikable protagonist. And yet he's 17 years old, he's been through a lot, and he's still trying to save people. So you might not like him, but I do. Obviously I can't really tell you about the plot of this book without spoiling things for the first book, but if you liked the first book, I'm pretty sure you're going to like the second book. There were some reveals that I only saw coming a little bit ahead of time, which was always very nice. And I just want the world for these characters, and I'm hoping that A.G. Edgman is going to write more things because I will want to read them. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!